of the concerns administration has been bearing is the fact that as workers, we work for very small salaries. Anybody knows that? Nobody knows that. So it's not small for you, right? Thank God. But I've oftentimes spoken to the executive committee and indicated that I know people who would have left school with a degree and started working at an entry point level in organizations, and they're getting more money than our directors who are working with the conference for 40, 50 years. Working for much more than the president, who is working for nearly 40 years. We don't get money. We don't get much money. But you know what? I've never seen anybody scrunting around the place. Amen. I've never seen any worker so destitute that they cannot get food or buy food. You look so good. You dress so well. Your faces look so healthy. I'm not taking for granted that you want more. We all want more, don't we? Oh, you don't? Okay, fine. I want more. I'm not taking that for granted at all. But I have to say, as we think about the kind of work we do as church workers, God has certainly blessed us with a little, and that little has become much. You know what Paul says, and he was talking to Christian people. He said, my God shall supply all your needs. And if you're a believer in God, you're working for him, you're working for the church, we must believe and accept that the Lord will take care of his people. Can I get at least one amen from you this morning? Yeah, I'm trying to preach here, Sister Kato. No amens. God will take care of us. He will. And I was reading this morning in the book of Luke, and I just want to share this before we bring the presenter on. Which of you intending to build a tower sitteth not down first and counteth the cost? This morning we want to help you count the cost. And so we have invited a financial planner who has worked with many large companies and corporations in Trinidad to provide this service to their employees. But she doesn't just work with large companies, she also works with individuals. And she said to me, I have a passion for helping people, helping individual people. Of course, I am guessing she doesn't do as much individual work and intervention as she used to, but we are delighted that she consented to work with all of us as a collective so that we could count the cost. One of the concerns administration has is that we believe that if you're a worker for the church, while you may not be able to go and live on 10 Downing Street or Buckingham Palace, or, up there where Brian Lara lives, in that big mansion, your little mansion, wherever it is, should be yours. We have a goal that every worker in the South Caribbean Conference would own their own homes. Amen. We have a goal that every worker in the South Caribbean Conference will have savings and would have investments that they could count on, especially when you get to retirement and you don't have to be going into a retirement job just so that you can survive. The person that's going to help us process the whole matter of planning our finances is a very strong member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. She's a very committed leader in the church. She served as a conference committee member for 8 years, and her dedication is to building the Church of God. She worked at TSTT as a manager, and if I remember well, she left that to do what she's doing now. She's a certified financial planning coach, and as I said, she does this for many large companies around the country. Let's welcome Sister Rhonda Reid-Hylegar. Her husband is here with her, Chris Reid-Hylegar. Please stand, sir. They are both members of the Maranatha Church, very committed members at that, and we're happy that Sister Reid-Hylegar could be with us today. And I find you're behaving as if you want lunch already. Come, put your hands together for her, please.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I must say it is really kind of intimidating to be standing here, though, in front of this august crowd of people, but God is able, right? Okay. So I very much want to thank Pastor Moses. Where did he go? Pastor Moses, thank you so very much for the invitation to be here this morning. Because the thing is, God has really put on my mind, the whole thing about educating the members of the church to be able to better manage money, to be able to be better stewards. And we should always be the head and not the tail. Yes, God is going to bless us, right? But we have to do our parts as well. Thank you to Pastor John and Pastor Sampson for those powerful message and prayer, and for even the icebreaker, and of course what may have gone before I reached. It really is good for us to get together sometimes and do things together and learn together. And I pray that, even though here today we are a mixed group of people, so we have, of course, varying financial needs, varying financial knowledge, what I'm going to try to do by the grace of God is to cover as wide and as broad a number of topics as possible. Of course, we can't get into all of them in any big detail. But what I will do is try to pull out the 1 or 2 points that I think most people have challenges with, and we will look at those so that at the end of the day, at least everybody here could see some area of their financial life that could be improved. So how are we going to do this? I'm going to be looking at about 7 different topic areas. I'll go through the area, and at the end, we'll open for some questions. Now, I'm trying to stick within the time limit. I put my phone here, so I have the timer on to make sure, Pastor Moses, that I stay on track. So we'll try to take the questions then. I'm asking, though, please, if the questions could be more on the material presented as opposed to personal questions, because you would recognize, the setting here is not really for the personal issues, and it's difficult to answer a personal financial planning question without knowing the big picture. Right? I wouldn't want to try to even do that. So we're going to look at it that way. We recognize also that everybody here today, of course, is a worker of the South Carib Conference, but our family members may not be. So some of the things that I'm going to mention and talk about may not be directly related to you as workers of the conference, but of course, it will apply to members of your household, because when we're talking about managing money, it's usually the household, the family unit that is involved. So, okay? So I think that's about the points that I want to make to start off. Oh, there's one other point. As Pastor Moses said, I have been doing this for a while. Mainly I work with corporate clients. You may find in the presentation that I may mention a product or two or an institution or two. I want to be clear. I am an independent financial planner. What does that mean? I am not affiliated with any company, with any product, with any person. So anything I might recommend is simply because I think it's the best option, as opposed to it benefiting me in any way. It does not. that was one thing that I decided early o'clock. Of course, it cost me quite a bit, as people would tell me, if you try to do it on your own without a connection, it doesn't work out financially, but that's okay. It has worked out well enough for me because God is leading. We also recognize that you might find a lot of things that we're going to talk about might be different to how you know it. And that's okay, because I have recognized, even among Seventh-day Adventists, so I have quite a number of Seventh-day Adventist clients, sometimes we do things not because we deliberately want to do things that might be a little contrary to the Word of God, but simply because it's just the way it has always been done. We have seen our parents do it. We have seen people around us do it, so we just follow. So you may find some things need a little unlearning so that we could learn new things so that we are more consistent with doing it by the Word of God. So we are doing this in a seminar style as opposed to a workshop style. Normally, this is my introduction, and by the way, I ain't started yet. Okay. Normally, I would do these sort of presentations as workshops for an entire day. So I'm going to try to squeeze what would be covered in a day into 3 hours. So you may find that there's not a lot of practical. We usually do a lot of practical in these sessions where you actually work through your entire financial plan. We may not have a whole lot of that, but I still pray by the grace of God that we could have some participation. And please feel free to ask questions. You might think a question might be a silly question, but believe you me, any question anybody has to ask, somebody else here is thinking about it. All right? So feel free to ask. We all going to learn together. I don't know everything, right? But when we pool at all what we all know, we all end up better. All right? So without further ado, let us pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so very much, Lord, for Jesus. We thank you for your word. Your word is truly a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. Father, your word has everything that we need for living, including, Lord, for managing your money. So I pray, Lord, that as we are about to start this workshop session, this seminar session, first, Lord, I ask you to empty me. Lord, I have to decrease so that you can increase. I pray that you will fill me with your Holy Spirit. Touch my brain cells, my lips, every word that comes from my mouth. As we invite your Spirit, Lord, not only for me, but for every person in this place today. Lord, we all have some challenge somewhere that we need your touch. And I pray, Lord, that as I speak, it will help me to be clear and help me to touch the areas that every person here will benefit today from what has to be said. So, Lord, we give you all the praise, honor, and glory. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, I saw this article in the newspaper a little over, can you all see it clearly, by the way? Okay. This was an article in the newspaper, the Trinidad Express, on October 29th, and it stuck with me. The first couple sentences especially. It starts like this. When the rice finishes, we make dumplings. That's the reality. I'm quoting the article now. That's the reality for one family because they simply cannot afford to replenish food until the next paycheck. Living paycheck to paycheck is a dilemma many households are facing in Trinidad and Tobago. Some months, families sacrifice groceries to meet other basic needs. Two families who wish not to be named in this article told Express Business that they are living in survival mode. For each household, that means the only way to get by is scaling back on essentials every month. And I realize I didn't put my timer on. Okay, here we go, right. And this, brethren, is a reality, not just for these two families, but for a lot of families, even in the church. So we have to ask the question, how prepared are we really for financial success? The latest National Financial Literacy Survey was done in 2022. And there are some points here that I think would be very sobering to us. Apart from the fact that half of the people interviewed said they were not happy with their present financial situation, 76% said they were unable to cover their living expenses. Now, that is from us questioning 1,090 people. 76% couldn't cover their basic expenses. 51% had to borrow to cover their living expenses. And for those who didn't borrow, they said they had to cut back on the expenses, like we would have read in the article just now, or they would have had to draw down on savings. That's not a very good picture. And like I said, we as members of the church are part of the wider society. And I would not be surprised. In fact, I know for a fact that there are members of the church who experience things like this. Many times we tend to keep it quiet because we don't want people to know. But this is a reality. Therefore, today what we are hoping to do, we want to introduce you to the basic principles, tools, and techniques for successful money management according to sound biblical principles. Once we do it according to God's will, He is going to bless whatever. All right? So this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at certain goals and the budgeting aspect. We're going to try to do those two areas before the break. And then we come back, we're going to be looking at managing debt, planning for retirement, investment options, risk management, and estate planning. Of course, as I said, we're not going to overwhelm. It's not that we're going fully in depth into all of these areas. We're just going to pull out the one or two points that I think people tend to get a little challenged with mainly. Okay? So, how do we start? We start by setting and prioritizing our goals, knowing what we want to achieve. Why do we start there? Because when we know what we want to achieve, it motivates us to do the right thing. So once we could keep that in mind, we know that, okay, we are working towards something, and you would find that once you have a financial goal set, making financial decisions become pretty easy because you ask yourself this basic question. Before you spend any money, ask, is this expenditure going to help me get closer to my goal or to reach my goal faster? Or is this expenditure going to keep me back from fulfilling my goal? And once you ask yourself that question, you would realize that making financial decisions become quite easy afterwards. So, the Bible tells us in Proverbs 29:18 that where there is no vision, the people perish. It's very important to set goals, both personal goals as well as financial goals. Now, we could define goals in a number of ways, by type, by time, and by use. Talking about personal goals, those are what we call God's plan for our lives. The financial goals focus on things that require money. Now, the personal goals may or may not require money, but the financial goals, of course, definitely do need money. Thank you very much. Thank you. The time frame, short, medium, long term, 1 year, 1 to 5 years. Some people say 1 to 3 years or over 5 years. And very important, the use of the goal. You see, a goal could be either productive, meaning that you're using money to either make more money or to get a financial benefit. That would be, for example, using money to invest, or maybe using money for your education, which will give you, hopefully, a higher salary. Or a goal could be consumptive, meaning that you use the money, but there is no direct financial return. Now, you may get a return, you may get a benefit. For example, going on vacation. Are you benefited from a vacation? Oh, yes, certainly. You come back revived and refreshed. But what happens is if you were to borrow money to go on a vacation, or even if you don't borrow, if you were to use your resources, you find that there is no direct financial return. We see this a little later going on. So these are some examples of personal goals, talking about doing ministry, family values, mentoring, keeping healthy, all right? But financial goals, as I say, require money. Things like real estate, education, being debt-free, starting a business, or just living the life we want to live, being able to travel, okay? So let's start. When you are setting a goal, your goals have to be consistent. What do I mean by that? If in the long term you want to purchase a home, Pastor Moses talked about, he has a vision for every conference member, every South Caribbean worker to have a home. A very good goal. If we want to purchase this goal in the long term, what are some of the things we need to have in place before we can purchase a home? Anyone? Collateral, okay. What else? You have to be working. That's what you said, right? Yes, have to be working. And not only just working, you must have a minimum salary, right? Because there are minimum salaries now to be able to qualify for a mortgage. What else do you need? Correct. And not only to service the mortgage, but even, as somebody said, to make the deposit on the mortgage. But there's one other very important thing you need to have in place before you could take out a mortgage. Right, not necessarily debt-free, but certainly you must have a good debt service ratio. So you all have said it all. You must have a good debt service ratio, you must have that deposit, and you must have a qualifying income. So if I am looking at purchasing a home in the long term, what then should I be doing in the medium term? I know I would need to have an acceptable debt service ratio. I know I would need a down payment, and I need for my income to reach a qualifying level. What should be my activities in the medium term? Savings, increasing your savings. Certainly, if you want to have a deposit, you must increase your savings. What else? Right, pay down debt so that your debt service is within the acceptable range. And what else? Okay, I'm just going to move on in here, but certainly, so you want to reduce debt so that your debt service ratio is now acceptable. You want to accumulate a deposit to be able to have the down payment. And if you need to increase your income, then you might want to see about getting a promotion or maybe starting a side business. What then should be our activities in the short term? If that's what we want to accomplish in the medium term, what should we be doing in the short term? Cut down on unnecessary expenses, right? What else? Okay, I'm just going to go ahead in the meanwhile. Certainly, reduce your expenses so that you increase your surplus. You use that surplus to increase your savings. And if you need to start a little side business, you might want to do some short courses. Now, does this make sense? Right? So that's what I mean when I said your goal should be consistent. So if you are looking to purchase a home in the long run, and you know you don't have a down payment, and you know your debt service isn't good, then don't be saying in the short term, I'm going on 2 vacations for the year. Because then you are using the money that will take you away from, remember you said you're asking the question, is this expenditure going to get me closer to my goal or further away? If I go on vacation twice for the year, is that going to help me meet my goal of purchasing a home, or is it going to keep me back? Now, it doesn't mean you'll never take a vacation, but it means you might want to limit the vacations until after you get the home. Or certainly, even if you don't limit them, you might forget the around the world vacation and maybe just do a staycation. Okay? So we need to have consistent goals. And the goals have to be SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So if I were to give you the goal, create an emergency fund, is that a good goal? It's a good goal. Everybody should have an emergency fund. Is it a SMART goal? Okay, all who say it's a SMART goal, let me see. Okay, how will you know when you achieve the goal? How would you know when you have finished and you have a good fund? We have no way of measuring it, because that goal, as good as it is not SMART. This is a SMART goal. Create an emergency fund of $12,000 by saving $500 per month for the next 24 months. It's specific, we can measure it, we know when we would have achieved it, it's realistic, and it has a time frame within which we will do it. That's how we want to create our goals. You recognize the difference, right? We want to do this to keep ourselves on track. If we don't do that, you would find that, we have some money there, maybe it's the emergency fund, but it is not what we would have worked out. And, okay, let me just break my own rule. Any questions so far? Okay. So, let me give an example of setting a financial goal. Suppose your goal is to open a health food store. You work out that to fix the place up and to get some equipment and supplies, work out about $35,000, and you want to do this in 4 years' time. Now, it's going to cost us $35,000 today to open this health food store. Is it going to still cost $35,000 in 4 years? No. Why not? Inflation, correct. Inflation is the rise in the prices of goods and services, and it's measured by a year-on-year increase. And when we are setting goals, we have to recognize that any goal 1 year or more in the future will be affected by inflation. Now, why is this important? Because if we were to say we are saving $35,000 for our health food store, what year did I say it was? December 2027? Yeah, when December 2027 reaches, and we have 35,000, we probably still won't be able to do everything because the cost of everything would have gone up. So therefore, when we are planning, we need to factor in inflation. Now you might want to know, well, how are we going to do this? How could we, how do we put in the inflation in all of this picture? Well, I'm going to try to simplify it, okay? This is a chart showing you the annual headline inflation. Headline inflation is the inflation across everything. Now, how inflation, anybody knows how inflation works? Basically, you have a basket of goods, and these goods would include everything that you need for living. So there's a little bit of food, a little bit of clothing, a little bit of transport, a little bit of housing, whatever you need for basic living. And that basket is priced at a certain date. And every year, they measure the cost of the items in that basket. And the change in the cost of the items in that basket would be the inflation rate. That's a simplified way of putting it. Now, if we want to be really specific, then of course, if you're buying a home, you might want to look at the inflation for housing. But that's really getting into nitty-gritties that, we don't really have to go into. We're just going to look at the headline inflation. We tend to have headline and core inflation. Core inflation excludes food. Headline inflation includes food. So this is the average for the last 10 years, and I've worked out the average for 5, 10, and 20 years. You would recognize up to 2015, the average was about 5%. And then it went down between 2016, and it was very low for the period 18, 19, 20, even into 21. Now in 2015, they changed the formula for calculating inflation. So I am not sure that these figures, I could tell you, I wasn't experiencing this in the grocery. Right? I certainly, and I know from sessions I would have done in those years, the people in the sessions told me that wasn't their experience either. It certainly was a whole lot more than that. But nevertheless, what we are seeing is that between last year and this year, inflation has now risen significantly. So all of that to say, if we're doing planning, it's safe to use roughly a 5% inflation rate for planning going forward, right? If you're up to the technical things, you could actually go in and look at your specific inflation rate. Am I confusing everybody, or you're still with me? Still with me, okay, wonderful. So how do we apply this to our goals? Well, back to our health food store. We know we want to do it in 4 years. We need $35,000. We are assuming an inflation rate of 5%. How much would we need then in 2027? Now, long ago, we used to have to pull the present value and future value tables. Now it's a whole lot easier. We just go online. You could go online and look for an inflation calculator, but make sure it's a forward flat rate inflation calculator. And if you like, I could send some of these links. I was really hoping to have done it before. I just didn't have the time. But I could send some of these links in an email to Sister Nadine, and she could send it out to you if people are interested. Okay, just let me know. So just look for a forward flat rate inflation calculator. You put in the amount. Well, my light isn't working so much, okay. But you put in the amount, you put in the inflation rate, number of years, and you just hit calculate. There's another one again. Make sure forward flat rate inflation calculator. So now, having put that in, we recognize that we should really be working towards saving about $42,500 instead of $35,000, so that when the next 4 years come, we will be ready and able to open our health food store without any challenge. Is that clear, how we do things? Right? So for any goal that you have in the future, it's a good idea that to factor in inflation so that when that time reaches in the future, you are sure that you have enough. Okay? So knowing what we want to achieve, very important. And I would say write down your goals there. When something is in black and white, it makes it a little more real. So it's good to have in your head, but black and white works better. So knowing what you want to, where you want to go and what you want to achieve, we're going to look now at where we are. And then for the rest of the morning, we look at how we're going to get there, okay? So to assess where we are financially, we want to know our net worth. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 27:23, be diligent to know the state of thy flocks and look well to thy herds. This net worth statement is basically a summary or a snapshot of your financial affairs at a particular date. It lists your assets, which are the things that you own, as well as your liabilities or what you owe. When you are doing this statement, for the assets, you would look at what are actually the cash values or the market values of these various things. So you look at what you have as cash in the bank, your insurance surrender value, your fixed deposits, credit union shares, investments, you know. Now, some of these things may seem tedious, but what I am sharing, I'm telling you, you see, if you don't have the foundation in place, it's difficult when you reach, trying to do something, you could find yourself in some challenge. Putting these things in place is very, very important for financial success. So it's a little tedious, but you know what? When you're pulling all these things together, you're going to do a twofold job. You're going to kill two birds with one stone. So when you pull the statements, or you go online to check what the outstanding balances are, here what you're going to do for each of these things. You're going to say, for the cash, you're going to say bank, if it's what, Scotia Bank, whichever branch of Scotia Bank, and you're going to put the account number. Why are you doing this? Because when we reach the estate planning at the end, you'll see how important this information is, all right? So for each of the assets, you're going to put what the market value is, and then you're going to add them all up. So your fixed assets, of course, would be like your house and your furniture and all those things. And then you look at your liabilities. For the liabilities, we are not looking at your monthly payments. We are looking at the outstanding balances. So what is the outstanding balance on your mortgage, your bank loans, insurance, all these various categories? Add up all of them, and you get your total liabilities. You subtract assets minus liabilities, and you get your net worth. Now, that net worth, like I said, is a snapshot of your current financial situation. And because it's done as at a particular date, it allows you to track your financial progress over time. You want to aim to have a positive net worth. You want to own more than you owe. A negative net worth or owing more could be a sign of financial trouble. It's possible for people who are now starting out that you have a negative net worth. So you now start to work, you don't really have many assets as yet, so you might have to borrow, maybe you want to purchase a car, get a home organized. So it's possible to have a negative net worth at the beginning. But the main thing is that as you grow forward, you want to see movement. And it is also very important because that positive net worth helps you to weather financial difficulties. So let's look back at what happened in COVID. In COVID, now it would not have happened to you here as workers of the South Caribbean, but certainly I am sure somebody here might have had a family member who either lost a job or who had a cut in salary. If you have a situation where your income is cut off, then having a positive net worth allows you to weather that period until you could get back a financial flow. Because you can use assets that you have, you could use cash that you have, or fixed deposit that you have, and continue to make payments to your loan without losing that asset that you're paying. So if it's your house, if it's your car, it allows you to be able to continue making payments and not lose it. Because if not, and you have paid and you can't continue paying, the banks are very, very quick to want to repossess, right? So it helps you. Now, having said that, we said that net worth is equal to assets minus liabilities. Apart from the example I gave just now, which is somebody now starting out, what could cause somebody to have a negative net worth? Think about it. Net worth is assets minus liabilities. What causes someone to have a negative net worth? Okay, I'm hearing, but I'm not hearing. Loss of income. How does that give you a negative net worth? Okay, I will take that, right? Okay, what else could give you a negative net worth? Wonderful. Now, the first part that you said, when your liabilities more than your income, what causes your liability to go up? Okay, let me put it this way. How could I? Let me just tell you the first one, and this one is the one that most people fall into the trap of: spending more than you are earning. Because the question is, how could I earn $100 and spend $120? Where does the 20 come from? It didn't come from the tree in the backyard, right? Where did it come from? We borrow. And many times, because of things like credit cards, we don't realize, because the credit card, remember now, you make the payment after the fact in the next month. So we don't really realize that we are spending more than we are earning. It's only when we start to put things down on paper that we recognize it. Spending more than you're earning. So then it means that you are borrowing. And once you are borrowing, as my sister said, you are putting more on the liability side of your net worth. Okay, give me another reason that you could go into a negative net worth. Illness. Somebody said illness? Right, that's correct. It's not the next one, so I'm going to just jump ahead. Borrowing for consumptive goals. I gave the example of a vacation. So you're going on vacation and you take a loan. What do you have now? So we're looking at our statement of net worth. On the liability side is the loan that you have to pay back. What do we have on the asset side? Got good time with some pictures, right? So borrowing for a vacation or borrowing for a consumptive goal puts us in a negative net worth. Now, does it mean that we'll never travel? So what do we do instead if we want to travel? Save for it. And that is actually the best thing that we could do where consumptive goals are involved. Save for the consumptive goal as opposed to borrowing for the consumptive goal. You understand the difference, right? Okay. Then, negative returns on investments. Now, this is a very, very, very important one. Because many times I have found, even in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we tend to run after returns. And the reality is that high returns usually equals high risk, right? Anybody here remembers when Caribbean Airlines used to be BWIA? All right. Anybody remembers that BWIA at one time had shares that were on the stock market? Anybody remember what happened with those shares? Anybody here had those shares? Okay. I have to show you what happened with this one. This is an article from 2005, the Newsday. BWIA shares were launched on the stock market in 2001, February 2001. They went on the stock market at a price of $7.85. They never increased in price. From the first day, the price started to drop. And by July 2005, the value was 30 cents. In other words, the shares had lost 93% of the value, which translated to $53 million belonging to John Public, right? At that time, even though now investments are risky investments, they're risks, the government doesn't have to cover it. But the government at that time offered to give the shareholders, or to buy out BWIA shares at a price of 30 cents. And they refused. And then the offer went down to 20 cents. And they refused. It was delisted from the stock market at a price of 10 cents. So in other words, persons, and the thing is, a lot of persons, especially, I shouldn't say especially, but quite a number even of workers would have invested quite a lot of their money. Now, if people hear, and it's common, people talk about if you want to make money fast, invest in the stock market. So people see stocks and they rush and they buy it without doing due diligence. And a lot of people lost a lot of money, some out all their savings. So we have to be very, very careful, because it means that you could end up with a big, big loss. So what do? If you plan to borrow to invest, you only want to borrow if you have a guaranteed return that is higher than the rate of borrowing. So for example, if you are borrowing the money to invest and you're borrowing and you're paying 5% to borrow it, then make sure you're getting a return on that investment, a guaranteed return of over 5%. Other than that, don't borrow. Other than that, you could use your savings to do some investments. And again, it's all within a balance, as we'll see later on when we're doing investments. Okay? With me still, right? Okay. The other thing is unexpected or unplanned expenses. Somebody talked about sickness, right? Sometimes we do have emergencies. What we can do is best to do some risk management as best as we could. Well, some of these actually, we could do some risk management as we see a little later on. And of course, you could have loss of asset, but the liability remains. So you have your house, the house burns, you didn't have insurance on the house, but you're still paying a mortgage on that house. So that could give you a negative net worth. Any questions on a negative net worth, what the cause is? So these are things, remember we said we want to have a positive net worth. So these are things we want to put something in place for to limit the chances of us having a negative net worth situation. So to improve our net worth, we want to try to live within our means, spend less than we earn, get out of debt, and save and invest wisely. Any questions? Okay. So this is where we go now, spending less than we're earning. And to do this, we want to use a spending plan and increase our surplus. The Bible tells us that we must be content. We have to live within our means. Philippians 4:11-13 tells us, and this is the NIV I'm quoting, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. And I have some further counsel from the Spirit of Prophecy. She says, many, very many, have not so educated themselves that they can keep their expenditures within the limit of their income. They do not learn to adapt themselves to circumstances, and they borrow and borrow again and again and become overwhelmed in debt, and consequently they become discouraged and disheartened. In other words, that's spending more than you're earning and ending up in a negative net worth situation because you're borrowing. She says further, you ought to be careful that your expenses do not exceed your income. Bind about your wants. So I know Pastor Moses was talking about the fact that salaries are not very high. But we have to bind our wants to make sure that we live within our means. Therefore, we work with a spending plan. As Pastor Moses quoted this morning, and I'm quoting again now, Luke 14:28, for which of you intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it. And I'm going to just change it around a little bit. For which of you intending to spend money to cover expenses, yes. Which of you intending to cover expenses, do not sit down first and count whether you have sufficient to meet all the expenses. Right? It's important. And again, I'm giving some additional counsel here. I have known a family receiving $20 a week to spend every penny of this amount, while another family of the same size receiving but $12 a week laid aside $1 or $2 a week, managing to do this by refraining from purchasing things which seem to be necessary but which could be dispensed with. It means that even if our incomes are not the highest, we have a responsibility to live within our means, right? Whatever it takes, bind about the wants, live within our means. If we feel that we can't, then there are things that we said that you could try to maybe get a little, we'll talk about it just now, how to boost our income, but live within our means. So the spending plan, and it's a budgeter, but I don't like to use the word budgeting because I recognize, over the years, people, when they hear the word budget, it's like they start budget, pay figures. And it's a spending plan. It's basically a plan for how you are going to spend your money. And the nice part is that when you put this down on paper, if it ain't working out, you know what? There's something called an eraser, or on the computer there's backspace. But if you just go spending money, it ain't coming back, right? So we're going to start by looking at a plan in writing on paper. We're going to start by tracking our expenses for an entire month to get a realistic picture. Now, when we start doing this, we want a realistic picture. You don't want to go making it fit. If the reality is that right now you are overspending, you want to know that you are overspending so that you can do something about it. So you want it to be realistic. Now, if, like me, for example, I buy everything with my cards, with my credit card. So it's easy for me to track my expenditure. If you use cash, well, then you may have a little more work to just note everything that you are spending money on. But it's very important because we cannot grow financially if we are spending more than we are earning. You might think you're growing, it might look like you're growing, but you're not growing, okay? So track your spending for at least 1 month to get a realistic picture. This is a very kind of overwhelming looking spending plan. I just put it there to show you. There are different categories of spending, and I just have some of the breakdown in the categories. It's going to be different for everybody. But the main thing you want to do is to pick up everything that you would spend on a monthly basis. And I'm just going to point out a few areas here that people tend to overlook. For example, food. When you are spending on food, the typical thing is to count groceries and market. Many times we even forget market because we don't get bills and receipts. But do you know, buying food, buying breakfast, buying lunch, that counts as well towards the bill, because what you purchase is the equivalent of buying the groceries and preparing it. It's not that you're paying somebody to prepare it for you. And I do recognize that a lot of people here don't like to cook. Now, I could relate. I do not like to cook either, so I could relate. However, when we don't like to cook, the tendency might be to, fall back on buying something this evening, buying something. But we will see about that in a little bit, all right? So when we're looking at food, we want to add up all those things that we are including, the eating out. Now, if you're eating out for a special occasion, like for anniversary, that's different. That's under entertainment. But I'm talking about the typical, regular buying food, buying breakfast, we want to pick that up there. The other thing you want to make sure when you're doing this breakdown is when we're talking about loan payments. For the credit union, the tendency might be just to pick up the payment that goes to the credit union. But no, we want to separate it. So you want to put how much is going towards the loan. That will come under loan payments. Let me try again with the light. Okay. But you're seeing it on the right-hand side. Your right-hand side. So you want to, I took it off? Okay. Yeah, you want to make sure and separate the amount that is going towards loan, which will go under your loan payments, and the amount that's going under shares, which will go under savings. Okay? What else here? Right. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, even though it's a very important aspect. It's a very, very important. But the reason is, we have, I'm going backwards instead of forwards, right? This is a simplified plan. With a simplified plan, we have the same headings, and you could determine what the individual expense items are under the headings, okay? But while I'm not going into much detail, there's a session that Sister Liana Crosby and myself, we did a video about budgeting. It's on the South Carib website. And rather than spending the precious time I have today to go over some of that, I would encourage you to go and look for it on the South Carib website, and we have a little more detail about the budgeting aspect there. I am going to repeat 2 aspects of the things there because they are very important, and these are things that tend to derail people's financial plans. And the first one is this thing that is called allocations. It's still up? Right, allocations. Now, people ask, what is an allocation account? An allocation account is where we are planning for the irregular and variable expenses. In other words, these are expenses that are going to come. The thing is, we just don't know how often they're going to come. They don't come every month. But they're going to come, they tend to vary in the amount that we pay, and many times they tend to be pretty large. So because they are large, a lot of people get, they don't have the money for it, and they end up borrowing. So we are now becoming better stewards. We are planning for the expected. What are some of these things? Well, house insurance, property taxes, they say next year for sure. Okay, we'll see. Things related to your home, maintenance and repairs, the fridge go out, the stove go out. Car insurance, car maintenance, tires, batteries. We know those things going to go bad, right? They're making them to last so short now. They're going to go bad. Entertainment, vacation. This is where now we talk about for the consumptive items, the vacations and the entertainments. We are planning for it. The trips to the doctor, the dentist, the pharmacy, all these different things. You all can see it clearly? Okay, right. Now they're going to be different for different people. But we know, because we are trying, remember, we're trying to take charge of our expenditure, to take charge of our financial lives. We're going to plan for these. How we do it? We're going to put aside money each month to cover these types of expenses. We're going to put it in a separate account. Why separate? Because believe you me, even the most disciplined person, when you leave that money there in the account and it starts to grow, you're going to forget what it's for. And you're going to be walking down the road one day, see something in the showcase, and forget about your regular expenses and want to buy it, right? So put it in a separate account. When the expense is due, you use this account instead. So it's a revolving account that you put in every month and you take out whenever you need it. How do we work it out? So this is an example as to how you work it. You look at those expense items that apply to you. So for example, car maintenance, if you have a car, and you get an idea as to how much you would have spent in the previous year. So in this example, it's $6,000. Now, spending $6,000 a year, you might have spent it on 2 trips, but it was over the year. So it's the equivalent of spending $500 a month. Yeah? Yes? Yes? Okay. Similarly, if we spend $1,200 in the pharmacy for the year, it's the equivalent of spending $100 a month. Similarly, if we do home repairs, $2,400, whatever the expense is, work out what we would have spent in the previous year and see what the equivalent monthly amount is. You divide it by 12 to get the equivalent monthly amount. So in this example, it's $950. So what we do now is take that $950 and we put it into our spending plan. So we are now trying to limit the opportunities for us to borrow. In fact, if we have to borrow, we borrow from ourselves. So we put $950, according to this example, into an account. So when the car tires go bad and we have to purchase new tires, instead of using the credit card, we are now going to go to this account and we're going to borrow. Now, a good account to use for this is you don't have to go with this, but I'm telling you like the Unit Trust Income Fund, because it has a card that goes with it. And you could actually either swipe your card to be able to withdraw, to pay for the expense. In addition, you do get a little bit of interest, a little pittance, but you do get some interest, which helps keep it going, because you remember we talk about inflation. So at least if it's building as we go along, it helps a little bit, okay? So I'm trying to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes, this section of it. So when we talk about a spending plan, we would have done it first looking at a realistic picture. We may be in a deficit, that's okay. We may be in a surplus, praise the Lord. But we now want to relook it to either, if we are in a deficit, go from deficit to surplus, or if we are in surplus, to increase the surplus, because that surplus is what we're going to use to help us meet our goal. So remember, we had $42,000 to save for our health store, right? So we want to free up as much money as possible to help us to save for that health store. So this is where we start to practice economy. John 6:12-13 says, when they were filled, he said to his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, that nothing be lost. So they gathered them together, and they filled 12 baskets of fragments from the 5 barley loaves, which remained over and above unto them that had eaten. I'm sure the 5 barley loaves would have been lost in 12 baskets. but yet with the fragments, they had 12 baskets. Don't underestimate the power of economy, okay? We are counselor. The Lord would have his people thoughtful and caretaking. He would have them study economy in everything and waste nothing. The amount daily spent in needless things with the thought it's only a nickel, it's only a dime, seems very little. But multiply these littles by the days of the year, and as the years go by, the array of figures will seem almost incredible. All right? So, to increase our surplus, increase income, reduce expenses. Now, I'm not going to go through, I'm just going to put the highlights. This, you can look at the video to get an idea of it. Some ways to cut expenses, shop around for services. Now, let me just say, I have to say this. A couple years ago, I decided to look at our expenses at home and to redo some things. The package of the phone that I was on, I wanted to have unlimited local calls, so I could call my mom and keep in touch. But the package I was on gave me unlimited local calls, 100 free minutes for cell phones, and I think 200 overseas minutes. I didn't call anybody overseas. And I didn't like to use my phone to make cell calls, simply because I was always afraid I would go over the 100 free minutes. But I was paying a lot of money, I think $260-something or $270-something for that package. And I decided, let me go in and tell them, listen, I just want to get free local calls. And I got a package for $75. Now, I was paying for things I didn't need and didn't use. And getting what I needed and what I used freed up almost $200. In addition, we changed our internet provider. I ended up with a provider that was faster, that was cheaper, and we didn't have cable at home. We really don't have time to watch TV, but it came with a cable package with some whatever. So we got more for less. Changed the bank. I recognize that it's not an easy thing to open a bank account. I understand that. But the account I had in the bank, I used to pay $18 a month as a service charge for my checking account, and then they just upped it to $50 a month. Now, you might say $50 isn't much. I didn't look at the amount, I looked at the percentage increase. That's a whole lot. I literally walked across the road, opened another account, an account with another bank, that not only, oh, and by the way, back to the first bank, not only did they increase the service charge, they also increased the minimum amount to keep in the account that you don't have to, no, that was for savings account. They increased the amount for the savings account that you had to keep without paying service charge. It used to be $100, it increased to $15,000. Right? That if you went below $15,000, you had to pay service charge. Now, the average person ain't really keeping $15,000, that did not touch in just like that. Walked across the road and got an account, a checking account, where if I kept a minimum balance of just $2,500, I pay no service charge, and they gave me free top. Right? I'm just saying that sometimes the change, we freed up about almost $300 a month. Now, you might say $300, but listen, it's not just on the month. You have to start annualizing things. So let me just quickly run through this, right? So consolidate and pay off loans. We'll look at this a little later on. Reduce taxes. And again, you could go back to the video and we could see all of these. Lifestyle adjustments, repair, reuse, and do for yourself. Avoid impulse buying, and thinking annually. As I told you, I don't look so much at the individual amounts. I like to look at things from an annual perspective. Let's look at how this works. You see, seemingly small but regular purchases can add up to very significant amounts. We have to start looking at annual amounts to put expenses into proper perspective. So if, for example, you're buying, and I'm saying lunch here, it could be lunch, it could be breakfast, it could be food, whatever you're buying, you're spending $45 a working day on food. It means that for the week, you are spending $225, which is $11,700 a year. Now, who wouldn't want almost $12,000 to help them to the goal? Right? That 12,000 multiplied by 4, that's our health food store right there. right? So when we start looking at things from an annual perspective, you would recognize that what might seem like the little bits, as the quote we saw in Ellen White as well, the small outflows tend to really add up to very big amounts, okay? So as we free up money, we want to put all our surplus towards accomplishing the goals. We want to use standing orders, online bank and transfers. Don't think that you're going to be so disciplined to do it yourself, okay? And having done that, Pastor Moses, this is my last little point before we break. We want to now plan for the unexpected. And the unexpected, now we're going to have an emergency fund. Now this is, we are given good counsel. In Proverbs 21:20, it says, there's treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up. You might have had a capital of means to use in the case of an emergency and to aid the cause of God if you had economized as you should. Every week, a portion of your wages should be reserved and in no case touched unless suffering actual want to render back to the giver in offerings to go. So, that $500 we spoke about, it could be $200, it could be $100, it could be $50. Just start. Start and put aside. And this is not your emergency, this is not your retirement fund, it's not your investment fund. You want to save at least 6 months in a separate fund, which was not to be accessed except in an emergency. So that's the end of the budgeting segment. That's the nitty-gritty, hard work, stress you out section. When we come back after the break, we're going to be looking at things like managing debt, again to free up money, investments, where we put this money when we free it up, starting to think about retirement and some estate planning. All right? Any questions? Has it been clear, folks? Yes. Has it been useful? Yes. Okay, wonderful. So we're going to take a break here, Pastor Moses, and then we'll come back in a bit.